There's no possible way that you can eat healthy on that amount of money. We rely on food banks and the volunteers in our community to provide that service, but meat and potatoes aren't always provided. We have a lot of canned goods that come through the food banks that contain a lot of high sodium content. Folks on income assistance don't have the ability to really be able to eat healthy. So that's kind of why I bring up the issue around shelter allowance. And the minister asked me if I had some ideas, and I talked about this over the years. I've talked about if we're able to provide an increase. I've made a suggestion that we are indeed the lawmakers here. We could possibly look at making an amendment to the Tenancies Act. I've even over the years had conversations with several caseworkers who have said, well, why don't we just put it in the personal allowance? And then maybe the landlord won't understand. So they won't raise the rents. Realistically, and the reason I bring it up is because people are struggling. And when you're dealing with a mental health issue or an addiction issue, nutritional, healthy eating is a very important component of your overall well-being. And folks on income assistance just can't afford it. With the exercise that I made mention to you, Madam Minister, back in the fall, that the Dartmouth office has gone through, I've been there for going on 7 years. The former MLA was there for 8 years. And in and around special diet funding and transportation funding, we've seen an exercise take place where we've seen individuals have their normal $70 bus pass be taken away. Actually, let's say whittled down to a point of where, based on how many appointments they have, to about $18. And if they have 10 or more appointments, $36. Special diet funding, I honestly believe, and you can make a comment on this as to if the department is considering it, I strongly think that we should be looking at making an adjustment with the blue form, what we call our medical form. But if a doctor can fill that form out properly, special diet funding is a key component. It gives additional money to income assistance clients to allow them to have that opportunity to have healthy foods. The problem with the recent adjustments is that we've seen a lot of individuals who lost funding for their bus pass, who lost funding for their medical special diets because the doctors, honestly, I don't believe the doctors have a full understanding as to what their requirement is when it comes to filling this form out. Some doctors have taken it upon themselves, unfortunately, to not want to address the blue form and put it off for an individual. What has happened in our community, and over the last year, we've come up with this saying, individuals that rely on income assistance eat their bus pass and they use their special diet money to top up their rents. And that's basically what, we've talked about this before. How do we educate people to what people are really living on? And with this recent adjustment, it's caused some real issues. And I understand that, the finances of the province and giving somebody a bus pass of $70, and when you pull it down to 18, it's direct savings to the government. And we want to make sure those people that need it are getting that service. We've even seen people recently receive their bus passes through a PO, and that's fine as far as tracking that. But realistically, what's happening right now in my community, and with a large number of individuals that I deal with, we still don't have that bump in the shelter allowance. So when we take away the special diet funding, when we take away that transportation funding, they no longer have the ability to pay a power bill. They no longer have the ability to top up their rents. But rents keep rising. We have the Water Commission going before the UARB for another increase. And as I mentioned a couple weeks ago in the House, I have a number of landlords that are going to have no choice but to raise the rents because of the high cost of water. With the power bills going up, it falls on the backs of the Department of Community Services when these individuals fall in disconnect. They simply don't have enough. And I don't want, the greater society thinking that it's merely throwing money and putting money in these folks' hands. The minister and governments have to understand, and society has to understand, that these folks cannot afford to live in a safe environment, in a decent apartment. And housing, it's a right, it's not a privilege. And when you have somebody dealing with an addiction, when you have somebody dealing with mental health, if they have struggles paying their power bill or paying their rent, that is affecting their overall health. I'm going to get the minister to comment on this, and I don't mind if she takes some time, because, like I said, this is very important work that I do every day. And it's been a frustration of mine for a number of years. And I can honestly say, even though we've made some strides, and you know what, I will, and I did last year, I believe I gave your government credit for a number of the initiatives, and we've seen a few more this year. But I have to be realistic in telling you that going into my 7th year, I haven't quite seen the struggle that I'm seeing today. And is it, you know, us in opposition talk about the rising food costs. Is it your fault? Well, we have the HST increase, but food costs are going up. Is it directly related to you? Probably not. The NDP don't set food prices. Power bills. You know, is there room for you to step in and intervene? Well, in opposition, we say there is. Realistically, folks on income assistance, and especially those individuals that are dealing with addiction issues and mental health issues, individuals who are coming out of the prison system, men and women, aren't getting what they need as far as a basic right, which is that housing piece. And if we don't look at this, what happens is we're going to be paying for it in the end, because individuals are going to be selling their medications to make up for a loss of funding. I've had individuals come to me and say, they've taken my bus pass away, I can't get to my NA meetings or the community club for social meetings for mental health. We've tightened it up so much. And I know the minister's talked about, you know, getting to a more individual approach. What's happened in my community, it's been very, very stressful. I don't quite know what to do anymore, who to call on anymore when it comes to people who are in disconnect, who are unable to pay their rents. And again, I'll say, it comes back and falls in the hands of government, because we're bailing them out. We're no longer paying damage deposits. We've had people claw back on paying a damage deposit if your rent is above the allotted allowance. I don't understand that. In a way I do, because if someone's paying $575 and they're only getting $535 and they fall behind with the landlord, again, we have to bail them out. And that's why we have trustees in a lot of situations. But if we have an individual right now that can have an apartment for $550 or $575, I believe we still need to put that damage deposit in place, or at least a portion of it. And I've seen a number of cases where we've neglected to do that. And what happens is we have an individual that's homeless. So I'm going to finish off by saying that specifically around the medical blue forms and the diet, it's been a real frustration for me and my office, my assistant, and I believe the medical profession as well. I don't think that doctors fully understand what is required of them. The individual that's approaching the doctor might not necessarily understand the language that is required in order for them to receive a special diet. In the past, what we have done, to my knowledge in Dartmouth for the last 14 years, 15 years, is we've taken the word of the doctor when he writes on the prescription pad or writes on a piece of paper and sends it off to the department. This individual requires a high fiber, a low sodium, high protein diet, and medical transportation. For 14, 15 years, we've taken that word of the doctor, and now it's changed. But I think we've done a disservice to a lot of doctors because they don't know, and they're frustrated with the department. And the fact that now we require individuals to do this every year. Why are you coming back to us every year? Doctors are frustrated. I've had individuals, and a few of them seniors, and I know I've made mention to you recently, Madam Minister. I've had seniors in their late 50s and 60s who have been to their doctors 2 or 3 times in order to have this properly done. And their doctors have been really frustrated. And of course, the frustration levels of the individuals as well has gone up. And again, a lot of these individuals have health issues. I have taken it upon myself to do my own research in one particular case where a gentleman who, after 36 years of being an alcoholic, had finally taken the steps to put himself in detox with encouragement of his family in my office. He came out, he attended programs. We went and we did some research in my office around nutritional requirements for an alcoholic. I summed it all up in 4 pages and sent it out to his physician. His physician agreed with it. We passed it on to the department, and he was denied of medical transportation because he didn't see the doctor more than 4 times a month. But he was going to his programs every day, and he was committed to this. And it's basic knowledge. It's in print that an alcoholic requires basically the 5 basic food groups in order to get his system or her system back to being somewhat normal. It's not science that somebody in the department can't figure this out. And again, we talked about a holistic model and the individual approach. This individual, sadly today, has relapsed because we don't have the funding for transportation for him to get to his meetings, and we don't have the special diet funding because his doctor, and actually we're in the process of trying to find him another physician that is willing to take on the challenge. And that's a real bone of contention for me, and I think it's an opportunity for the department to go back to the College of Physicians or Doctors Nova Scotia and have that conversation, because we have a lot of these medical clinics setting up. And a lot of these medical clinics, when these individuals approach these medical clinics, the doctor needs to get to know you. And for a lot of individuals, with the addiction piece in place, a lot of them don't want people that are taking narcotics. A lot of doctors refuse to treat patients or new patients that are on narcotics. Many of these walk-in clinics. So finding a doctor that has the time, and we know that when we walk into our family physicians, it takes you're allotted about 15 minutes with that family physician. So is it fair for him or her as a physician to fill this medical blue form out and fully understand what the requirements are and the terminology and the wording that the department requires? Is it fair to send an individual to a doctor 2 or 3 times to have this in place for a mere few dollars? And I know we have to live within our means, and we've heard that. Realistically, we have people that are struggling. Realistically, what we've done by taking away transportation funding, and I know if we take the 40,000 plus people that are on income assistance and we give everybody a bus pass, we're looking at probably $4 to $9 million a year. But what I've seen is a lot of individuals have that right taken away from them to leave their communities, to venture out, to try new things, to seek out services. And it's unfortunate. And it's been mandated. There's been some real tough decisions made by some of the supervisors in the Portland Street office, and I don't envy them. But I would be remiss not to stand in my place today to tell you that, yes, your government has made improvements, and it's appreciated for those individuals that it affects. But for individuals that are on income assistance who have addiction issues and mental health issues, the shelter component, the fact that they cannot pay for their rent, and that's what society has to understand. $800 plus a month, $600 plus for rent. Throw your power in there, a possibility of a phone, which I know the department funds to a point. But in Dartmouth North, we eat our bus passes and we use our special diet money to top up our rent. And now that's been removed. And what we have are people that are on the verge, and there's no number for this real piece. We're on the verge of seeing people possibly homeless. And when this next round of increases come in rents, I don't know what I'm going to do anymore. I don't know where we're going to house people. And we know about the wait lists, and I'm encouraged by the housing strategy. It can't come soon enough. But now we're talking about having seniors wait to 67 to be on Canada pension. And I know I brought that issue up last year as the transition from 65, from off of income assistance to Canada pension. Housing is going to be a crucial piece. And it's not going to be just a crucial piece for people who are going to obtain the successful jobs and the high-paying jobs with the ship start here. But for those individuals, those 40,000 plus individuals that we know we need to take care of, we know that we need to put more resources in place to get them employable. The fact that they can't pay their rent, it's a huge problem. And I can only stress it that it's not just your government. I've seen it with the Conservative government in the past in my tenure here, but it remains an issue. And I'm running short of places to put people. So I'd like you to comment on the doctor piece. I think it's a real opportunity for government, like I said, to go to the College of Physicians and Doctors Nova Scotia and talk to those folks as to why individuals have to do this. It's part of the process, and a doctor should embrace that process and look at that individual's overall well-being. But if that physician doesn't understand what's required of them, who suffers? we save a little bit of money, but that individual suffers. The shelter component's very important. And as long as I come to this House and I have governments that aren't willing to increase it to at least where folks can afford to pay their rent without taking it out of personal allowances, I'll continue to raise the issue.
The Honourable the Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the member opposite for his compassion and his passion with respect to the individuals and the families that he's working hard for. You know, I understand what you're saying. I find it very difficult in my job every day to know that there's that many individuals with the needs and the dollar amount. You're absolutely right. I wouldn't stand in this House and argue that they're getting enough money. You know, it was very unfortunate. There was many surprises for me as coming in as a new Minister of Community Services, and I think one of the very unfortunate parts is that years ago under previous governments, there were no strategies for the future in terms of where do we need to go in terms of the increase that happens within our world each and every year, the increase of living, the housing component, and I could go on and on and on. And, you know, I think that's what was very difficult, because I felt like we were starting behind the 8 ball when we came in as government, because of the amount of dollars that individuals were receiving were not where they should have been in 2009. In reality, they weren't. So we're playing catch up. And that's why we've been working diligently and in a creative mode to bring in initiatives that can help individuals and families. And there's so much out there in needs. When you look at the Department of Community Services, it's not just one group of individuals or people. There's many, many needs that I feel were really quite neglected over the years. And so we are trying to get to a position, a better position, and I respect the fact that you say about living within your means, because of the fact what we have to try to turn around the economy in this province and the finances that we were left with, the aftermath of the previous government. And it's true. I mean, the fact is that we you know, you owe so much money and you're paying $1 billion out a year in interest rate. Well, that's the amount of money that I have in the budget for community services. And boy, wouldn't it be nice to have that extra $1 billion that's being paid down on the interest, right? So I think that that's the reality. We have to live in the reality, yet at the same time, the struggle is that we know that people are suffering out there. And for myself and for the department and for yourself, that's what you see each and every day, and that's what's really difficult. And so I guess what I'm expressing is that, number one, we truly recognize it. We truly, truly recognize it. We are truly working to try to make a difference by offering the variety of programs that we've been offering. With regards to the shelter component, by having a housing initiative will certainly be of a great benefit. To have a strategic plan. There's been a lot because of the stimulus funding invested in housing and affordable housing. But yet, I truly understand. I mean, if your rent, you have to pay the rent. And the cost of the rents go up. And the amount of money that people have at the end of the day to try to feed themselves, it's not right. It's unfair. And I will be the first to admit it. But I would have to say that I am working very hard in the department every day to see where changes can be made. I know staff are working very hard. And I think one of the other challenges that we've had is that we're trying to change the way that the entire system is working. And so you're looking at, like, you know, decades and decades of a particular way a system has worked. And then we're coming in, we're saying, you know, that's not good enough. And we've got the proof that it's not good enough, that we have to be different in our approach. And it's challenging. We have about 2,000 staff within community services. And as a minister, I can't know what each and every one of those staff are doing each and every day. What I can do is to try to change the culture and the model that we're working within. But I can't force it on individuals either, or that's not going to work. So we're trying, what we're doing is we have a plan that focuses on individual services plus a restorative approach. And that's the framework we want to work around. What we're doing now in the department is we're encouraging staff members to embrace that plan and to be able to see, to not be fearful to make a change and to do things differently. One of the other areas of inconsistency that I discovered in the department was we have different regional offices throughout the province, and because there wasn't a real clear-cut strategy for community services, you were often dependent on that region, and maybe they did business. I've discovered that, you know, what might have been done in central region could be done quite differently in western region. So to me, there was an inconsistency throughout community services and what might be provided at the grassroots level. And I think you've experienced some of that in terms of those changes that you're speaking of. And as you know, as soon as you came to me, I immediately went back to the department to ask what was happening there. And I encourage you to keep me up to date, because I know that I have to respect the fact, too, that those staff individuals at a senior management level are burdened with that whole financial picture. So there's reasons on both sides of why it's very difficult to be able to make change. But we are working towards it. We do have a plan, and that plan is moving along as we speak. And we're seeing more staff understanding the importance. And one of the things that we also had to look at was our own internal communications. I mean, that's key. You have to have two strategies. You need an internal communication strategy and you need an external communication strategy. And you have to be sure with that many employees that people understand their role. They also understand other colleagues' roles, other department divisions within the department, what they're doing, and to be able to feel free that there is a mechanism within community services as an employee that your voice can be heard and that there's a feedback to that, because of the fact that with any large organization, people often feel like they're out in the wilderness and no one's hearing them. So you have to be very strategic to make sure, and that's what we're also working on, and it will actually be the first real internal strategic plan that community services has ever had. And that's very important, because if we want people to carry that philosophy of being restorative and to work very diligently with individuals on that individual needs basis, that's what's really important, that they have to understand as a caseworker that you have that freedom. The challenge when you have a flexible system is to make sure that you don't go overboard in one area, that you once again find that in one part of the province people are getting a particular service more so than another. So there's a lot of challenges there, but I think that to succeed, you have to make sure that you're your communication system internally is very good, and people have a feedback mechanism and feel very free to be able to offer their opinion. And I think that you're right on with the medical. I think that there's we need to be always understanding that things need to be reviewed. And I think it's a very good point. You had brought it up to me the other day and made it as one of my notes that we can certainly look at. I know that, as you said, the time for a doctor is very challenging for them, and they're not going to take the time to find out all the ins and outs. They don't have the time of that particular individual. So sometimes the individual is left in a situation where they should have maybe got more that they didn't because of that. We have to always be, we have to clarify, you know, the medical forms. We have to clarify what can be available to individuals. So there's work to be done. There's no question. There's work to be done. I think there will always be work to be done in this department because you're involved with the human element, and that always change. What a need today might not even been something you would have thought of as a special need 5 or 10 years ago, right? And then what that cost would be to support it. But there's also, I think, opportunities, as we discussed in terms of transportation. And I think that one of the areas that we could do better work on, too, within government is more corporate relationships, and bring in the corporate factor to see if there's partnerships there. Now, we have done that. Really pleased with one program that we were able to initiate that was hasn't been done before, and that was to the homelessness initiative.
Excuse me.
And that brought together shelters, advocates for homelessness in Nova Scotia, along with the corporate factor. And with that partnership with government, we were able to come up with a model that is being implemented now. And that model is looking at what you were talking about in terms of people with addiction issues or mental health issues, that to provide housing for those individuals, but don't leave it at that, because I think that was the way of looking at things in the past, that the solution was to provide a home. That's only part of it. What you need is wraparound support. So it's like a hub model. So what we've done with that is have outreach workers that are able to look at what that individual needs in terms of support. And many of those supports already exist in the communities anyway, and so you can bring them together under one hub model to provide that support for the individual. So it's not just the housing component, it's also other supports that they may need, whether it's some types of medical supports, maybe they need a counselor, or maybe that they need some employment support. So developing a plan with that individual of where he or she feel they would like to go and how they can reach their goals and how we can assist them in reaching those life goals. No, I would not stand here and not say that there couldn't be other things that we could accomplish in terms of maybe corporate partnershiping on the transportation. You and I had a good discussion about that just yesterday, and I thought it was a wonderful combination of minds that came up with a potential opportunity that I will go back to staff with. And I think that that's what's so important, is to have the opportunity to sit down and brainstorm on what we can do. And it must be very difficult for you, because you're dealing on a daily basis with individuals that, I'm standing here and say things are getting better, we're working towards it, but the people have immediate needs, and that's the part that breaks my heart, because of the fact that I know there's those immediate needs. I know that we're working very hard and that we've made really good and positive change, and that we're moving in that direction. And as we get our feet back on the ground financially as a province, that we can do more investments. I mean, in a time when we have great financial constraints, last year I was fortunate that my colleagues supported my department in receiving an extra $22 million to use for initiatives within the department. Now this year our budget is reflecting $36 million in some key initiatives that we're going to be implementing it. So I've been very fortunate to work with colleagues and have a government that understands the importance of investing into the people of Nova Scotia with the greater needs. The truth of the matter is that we were so far behind when we came in that we're still running to catch up, and you know, and have that hope that we will catch up. But in the meantime, for those individuals that are suffering, that's where it's really important to come to the department and come to me, and we need to discuss those cases one-on-one. I'm more willing than, you know, I'm willing to do that. And as you know, excuse me, that one of the first things that I did within the first year as minister is that I did see that there was a need for the focus on the one-on-one service, and that when an issue came forth, that rather than to say it just does not fit within policy, I'm sorry, you know, you're going to have to wait because we're working on changes, was trying to come up with something that was for an interim basis to be able to help individuals to re-look at their situation if they received a no. And as you know, we created it's a position that's a seconded position, so it's not a new FTE, but a couple years ago we seconded Randy Acker to come to the department and work out of the minister's office to be a client navigator, and that has worked quite well for any of those who have used the services that Randy has offered. So yourself or any other members in the House have the opportunity to contact Randy or myself, and what he does is he goes back and reviews that whole individual case to make sure that if there's one bit of opportunity that we can provide the service necessary to that individual, that we take another look at that, you know. So I think, and that has worked well. There's been many situations where we've turned things around, and that I've been able as the minister to say, well, let's stretch that and create an opportunity here for the individual, because it doesn't make sense, you know, if somebody comes to you and they have a medical issue, let's say a dental issue, and that we need to tell them to go on community services in order to get the support to have that covered. Well, that doesn't make sense to me, because if you're looking at, you know, the time of staff doing that, the fact that you're making them go on income assistance when it may not be necessary, that isn't more logical to pay for the service they need, and then they're on their way, you know, because they don't need anymore. So that's the way we have to look at things. I wish that I had a golden wand that I could tap on this desk and make things better. And I know it's difficult, and I think what we have to do is we have to work as a team. We're all here, whether you're on this side of the House or on the opposite side of the House. We're here for people, and that's why we should be working together, not at each other, but working together, which you have done with me, to come up with solutions. Because if we don't talk, we're never going to come up with a solution. And who loses out is that poor individual that's trying to make ends meet. Thank you.
Thank you. The time allotted is now expired. The chair will recognize the honourable member for Bedford Birch Birch Cove. I have a Birch Grove in my constituency. Birch Cove for the Liberal caucus. The Honourable Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Mr. Chair, I think everybody has some kind of a Birch Cove, Grove, or something, a grotto in their writing. If we could start off by looking at affordable housing, our year-over-year estimates show the budget for affordable housing within the department has gone down by 73%. I've heard the minister speak about that a bit, but I would like to have her clarify what would account for this decrease, how this reduction will assist in reaching overall departmental goals, and will this reduction result in less stock being built or fewer repairs being done, longer wait times to get into affordable housing? How will this reduction affect client access to housing? I know, for example, the wait list right now is at about, I think, 1,700 people on the list. Thank you.
The Honourable, the Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Yes, I did reference this in my opening speech for budget estimates, that the reduction in the housing portfolio is a reduction due to the economic stimulus package. It's a program that is finished. The staff, the department worked very diligently, really hard over the last several years to get all the monies out and to fix up. We fixed up many units throughout the province of Nova Scotia. We repaired units, we built new units, affordable housing units. Like the first time in decades, we've had that opportunity to have those dollars in order to build new affordable housing for seniors, for people with disabilities. So it was a great opportunity that we had in the province of Nova Scotia to partner with the federal government and able to do that. And so we're very pleased, and I'm very pleased as a minister that our department was able to accomplish that, because I know that was a huge undertaking in order to be able to repair, build, and to develop more housing throughout the province. With respect to the housing component, I'm very excited about the fact that we are building a framework with respect to housing, and going forward with making many changes in housing and focusing on different housing opportunities that you can have in the province. And so I think that what you will find is that our housing component in the department is in a good position now. We have finished the stimulus funding, and we're in a very good position. This is the right time to go forward and to look at what we have and what we need to do, and we will be definitely going forward, and I think it's going to be a great opportunity for Nova Scotians to have that. And I know with respect to seniors housing also that it's a very important. Affordable housing is a key element in the province, and we recognize that.
The Honourable, the Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
I'm not sure I heard any actual indication how this reduction would assist in reaching overall departmental goals. Now, and I'm not really clear on how the federal funding works, so maybe the minister could explain that to me. When the money that was in your budget here is last year, did that include federal portion of the housing projects or only our matching funds? Because I'm not quite clear on that. So was the federal money flowing through the province here, or was that separate?
The Honourable, the Minister of Community Services.
Well, the stimulus funding for housing was a 50-50 agreement, and it would have flown through it flows through our budget. So that's why you would see it in there, and that's why you're not seeing it. That's where the reduction comes from. The reduction in our budget is because we're no longer receiving that 50% housing stimulus funding. So it's logical then that we would have a reduction in housing, and that's what that's reflective of.
The Honourable, the member for Bedford Birch Cove.
I get that there would have been a reduction. What I don't understand is why it's 73%. If it was a 50-50 split, why the reduction is 73%. I'm assuming that we're also reducing the money that we would have put in to that program, in which case I'm not really clear why that's happening, because clearly the need has not diminished.
The Honourable, the Minister of Community Services.
Once again, it's because there would have been our provincial portion. We were expected to put 50% in to the stimulus program, and the federal government would put 50% in. So that 50% of the federal dollars is no longer reflective in the budget. The 50% that we would have dedicated through community services is no longer reflective in the budget because that program has ended.
The Honourable, the member for Bedford Birch Cove.
So I'm correct in taking from that we are cutting the money that we're actually spending on affordable housing, because we could still be putting that 50% in to build housing. The feds decided to take their money out, they're done, the program's over, but there's no reason to say why we couldn't have continued on building houses if in fact there is need, and there does appear to be a need for that.
The Honourable, the Minister for Community Services.
The number that is in the budget for housing presently is reflective of the same number that would have been in the budget before the stimulus package was offered to us. So we're back to the number of dollars that was there when the federal government came forth with their stimulus package.
The Honourable, the member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I take it then that we are going back to 2008 levels of funding for affordable housing then, which when you consider what $4 million buys today versus what $4 million bought then is in fact a cut. If we look at the nonprofit housing programs, year-over-year estimates show the budget for nonprofit housing programs within the department down by 37%. I'm just wondering what would account for this decrease? How will this reduction assist in reaching overall departmental goals? And will this reduction result in less stock being built, fewer repairs being done, longer wait times to get into affordable housing? And how will this reduction affect organizations that work directly with affordable housing clients?
The Honourable, the Minister of Community Services.
As I said, the amount that is in the budget now is reflective of the same amount before the stimulus funding. There is an increase in the fact that now we have maintenance, we have repairs, we have costs to those new units. That has been budgeted for. And the extra dollars that you were talking about were once again from the stimulus program. So we have the same amount of dollars in our budget to work with that we had back in 2006. But the difference is that we have many, many new units. We have many, many repaired units for people with disabilities. So you cannot compare and say that we're back to the same level as we were in 2006. We are not, because we have so many more thousands of units throughout the province that have been either built or repaired. So because of the stimulus package, we are ahead of the game in terms of our housing than we were in 2006.
The Honourable, the member for Bedford Birch Cove.
The minister is referencing many units and thousands of units. I'm wondering if it would be possible to get the actual number of units that were built during that period and where they would be located. Perhaps if the minister has a chart or something, we could have that tabled. And also the number of units that were repaired and where they are located. Thank you.
The Honourable, the Minister for Community Services.
I can provide you with the following numbers and where the actual geographical location. I don't have that in front of me, but we can have staff provide that for you tomorrow. 48.1 million went to upgrade the province's public housing stock. 20.6 million for repairs, and that was for 1,100 units, and that was in the cooperatives and the nonprofits area. 27.4 million in new construction activity, representing almost 196 units. 13.3 million for the creation and the preservation of 409 units. 18 million for residential rehabilitation assistance, and that went to over 1,500 households. So the actual, that equates to 128 million under the stimulus initiative, and for the actual geographical areas that you would find those housing units and the repairs, we'll be able to provide that to you later on.
The Honourable, the member for Bedford Birch Cove.
So when the minister said there were many new units, you meant there were about 600 new units, and the thousands of units, those were repairs of about, I missed one number there, but I'm seeing about 2,600 repairs and about 600 units being built.
The Honourable, the member for the Minister of Community Services.
Okay, the numbers, I'll break those down for you. New construction units, which were mostly seniors, like the fabulous new construction that we opened, the Millwood in Lower Sackville, we're looking at 198 units, okay? Now, I think that this is a very important factor because it would have been a little bit silly of us if we would just continually build new units with the stimulus package and ignored the units that existed. So we had many units that were in real great need of repair. And so we took that opportunity with the stimulus dollars, and it was the right thing to do. And so you're looking at for public housing, the upgrades equates to 9,000. That's a lot in a 2-year period. And for co-ops and nonprofit units, it would have been 1,124 that we would have repaired.
The Honourable, the member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Okay, in the original, when we talked, not this past answer, but the one before, you referenced $13.3 million going to something, and it was 409 units, but I didn't catch what that was.
The Honourable, the Minister of Community Services.
The 13.3 million for the creation and preservation of 409 units, those would have been ones that are already existing that needed to have work done on them, whether we had to go in and totally gut an apartment or whether we had to just go in and make some upgrades to that particular unit.
The Honourable, the member for Bedford Birch Cove.
So I just want to be clear here that in terms of new construction under the federal stimulus money, that particular program, what we saw was 198 new units. Is that it?
The Honourable, the Minister of Community Services.
As I said in my previous answer, yes, there was 198 new units. However, it did not make any logical sense to go out and build new unit after new unit when we had so many that were in disrepair. So we had over approximately 9,000, and that's a lot, 9,000 upgrades that we had to do, and we had approximately 1,124 that were the non-profit and the cooperative. So that's why the number for the new units, which are mainly focused on the seniors, equals 198. And as I said, that may not sound like a lot, but in 2-year period, we had well over 10,000 units that were repaired, and I believe if you ask those individuals who lived in those units are pretty thrilled with the fact that we made sure that their units were brought up to good standards for those families to live in.
The Honourable, the Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
I'm sure they were. Thank you for explaining that. Our year-over-year estimates show the budget for public housing subsidies within the department has decreased by 7%. I'm wondering what would account for that decrease and how this reduction would assist in reaching overall departmental goals, and will this reduction result in fewer subsidies or decreased access to affordable housing?
The Honourable, the Minister of Community Services.
Once again, that $7 million is reflective of stimulus dollars. And you mentioned about where does that put us with overall departmental goals. Where we're at is in a good position because of the fact that we've had this great opportunity in the last 2 years to create new senior units, to be able to repair that many units, which I think is an incredible amount. Just think of the work that when you get your own home repaired, how long it typically takes to get that done. And to be able to stand here and say that we're looking at well over 10,000. And so we're in a good position. We're in a good position because of several things. We just renewed our federal provincial housing agreement. And that will equal another $60 million that we will have to be able to utilize to 2014 with that agreement. And that agreement, there's more flexibility than there used to be in the past, which is very good for us. And we were very appreciative that that was heard by the federal government to have more flexibility and where those dollars can go in terms of housing. The other reason that we're in a very good position because we have made a commitment as a government to develop a framework with respect to housing in the province and how we can be more creative to look at what we have in the province and how we can make sure that there's increased numbers. We do know and we do understand that there is a waiting list, and so that is certainly something that we want to be able to tackle. But the first thing we needed to do was to repair what was already in existence that needed that repair work done. Now that we've got that done, then we can go forward with our new initiatives and to be able to look forward to building and having more affordable housing throughout the entire province.
The Honourable, the Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Sorry there, Mr. Chairman, I jumped the gun. I'm wondering if it would be possible to get a printout so we can see what kind of work was being done on the houses there. I'm sure that the folks who got the work done were very appreciative of that. It would be good for us to be able to see an example of some examples of what kinds of things were done, because a figure that big, it's kind of tough to know what kind of work would have been done. In terms of housing authority and property operations, year-over-year estimates show the budget for the housing authority and property operations within the department went up by 3.2%. Just wondering what accounts for this increase. and how this increase is going to assist in reaching overall departmental goals, and will this increase actually result in affordable housing, access to affordable housing and decrease wait times for those waiting to get into public housing? Thank you.
The Honourable, the Minister of Community Services.
On the first part of your question, that increase is reflective of increases in our leases. As you know, and the leases of head office and our other offices, that there's typically an annual increase, and that's what that is. If the member opposite didn't mind asking the second part of her question, because I didn't catch the second part to her question. Thank you.
The Honourable, the Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
I suspect actually the minister answering the first part of it will have answered the question for me, because it was, will this increase access to affordable housing and shorten wait times for those waiting to get into public housing? So I would assume that's, since that's just an increase in the leases, that's not the case. Okay.
The Honourable, the Minister of Community Services.
Yeah, you're correct. That's not the case, because it's increases in our leases.
The Honourable, the Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
I'm sort of working backwards, actually. I'm going to housing services. The overall year-over-year estimates show the budget for housing within the department has decreased by 15.4%. Am I right in assuming that the decrease is the result of other line items under housing services being decreased, like affordable housing, like non-profit housing programs, et cetera, et cetera?
The Honourable, the Minister of Community Services.
That particular number is because of two things. One is that we were finished with the stimulus. However, at the same time, we have increased operating costs within our housing services.
The Honourable, the Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Thank you, Minister, for clarifying that. And just to clarify, the list of the repairs that were done, I don't think I heard an answer to whether it be possible to get that list.
The Honourable, the Minister of Community Services.
Certainly, I will make sure that we get you that list.
The Honourable, the Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Thank you. In terms of, there's two items on page 5.8 of the supplementary information, the rent supplement program and the rural native housing programs. And I noticed that the money from the estimate in 2011-2012 and the forecast are exactly the same, and that remains the same in 2012-2013. What concerns me there is when you see that all the money is spent in a program, what it often means is that there are people who are being excluded. And so I'm wondering if you could speak to how that works, how that program works. Are there people on a waiting list? When you have the exact same amounts being spent in estimates, in the forecast, in estimates the year afterwards, that sets off an alarm bell for me.
The Honourable, the Minister of Community Services.
There's two different programs there. One would be you're mentioning is the rent supplement. So that is where we would supplement the rent to the landlord to help out the renter. And the other one is the other program is a program that's a federal program. So I don't know if you have a more clarified question on that. I'm not quite sure.
The Honourable, the Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
So what I'm saying is I'm assuming that because the dollars have remained constant in what was forecast, and what was estimated, and then what was actually spent, and then what's estimated again the next year, there must be people who are missing out on this program. If there's a program where every single cent is spent, that just doesn't happen without there being people being left out. And I'm just wondering, do we have any numbers on that? Do we know who's not getting in? Is there a wait list? I would assume that with, you know, what we're hearing about rents increasing, and I certainly do hear this a lot, that it is difficult to rent an apartment for the amounts that are given by DCS. I'm assuming that there must be a lot of apartments where the rent is more than what DCS normally gives, and so I am assuming those rental rates are increasing because that's certainly what I'm hearing out there. So how is it that the same amount is being spent? I can't see how everyone who wants to access this program is getting in.
The Honourable the Minister of Community Services.
The Native Housing Program is a program that has existed for a very long time. It's an older program, and we provide subsidy for rental units. There's 588 of those units, and is also, we have 234 units that are homeowner units, and they're to low-income, non-native rural households and off-reserve Aboriginal households. And that particular program, normally the family or the individuals that is accessing it stay in those homes for quite a long time. Now, I know that you had mentioned that there is some wait list to that. I don't have the numbers right here of exactly those numbers. If you want them, we can get them for you. But it would be like any program in community services. We would like to be able to do more, and we're working towards that with respect to all our programs in terms of improvement. However, this is a lot of these programs, we are helping to subsidize them, or helping also with their mortgage or some of the rental in those programs.
The Honourable the Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Thank you for clarifying that federal program because I wasn't familiar with it. The rent supplement program, I wonder if the minister could speak to that and how it is that the numbers have remained constant.
The Honourable the Minister of Community Services.
With respect to the rent supplement, it is a program that is tied into what is available in terms of the budget and how many rent supplements that we're able to provide to individuals is actually based on what the budget is. So that's where the budget is the same as it was before. That's what we'll be able to provide to the number of individuals that are already receiving rent supplement.
The Honourable the Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
So I think we're saying the same thing there, that basically there's the program has X amount of dollars in there, and once it's spent, that's it. And so would there be a waiting list for that? And if so, would we know how long it is?
I just remind the members we have approximately 30 minutes left in this round of questioning. The Honourable the Minister of Community Services.
You're on the same page and speaking the same language. We can get back to you with actually what numbers we have on a wait list. Presently, I think it's important to know that we do provide rent supplements to 1,000 clients at this point in time.
The Honourable the Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Thank you. I jumped the gun again. I'm wondering if we could just look at the supplementary detail of the estimates on page 91 and 92. There are a number of lines that indicate payments made to community services. It comes to just over $700,000 if you add them all up. And I'm just wondering how those monies were spent and how much is budgeted to be spent on Communications Nova Scotia this year?
The Honourable the Minister of Community Services.
What the breakdown of the numbers within those categories, you're looking at 6 staff individuals. 4 of those are communication staff and 2 are departmental staff, and there's just a slight increase of 1% in the budget with respect to that. Now, the actual breakdown to monies being spent within the communication division in the department.
Order, please. The members are having a little bit of difficulty hearing the responses of the minister, so I would ask those members that if you're going to have conversations and you'd like to carry them on outside the chamber, that would be great. The Honourable the Minister of Community Services has the floor. And you may want to start over again just so she could hear the whole thing. Thank you.
Absolutely. The breakdown in that particular category is you're looking at 6 staff. 4 of those would be within communication. 2 of those staff are our staff in the department. The CNS budget amount is $461,000. I actually today I was requested yesterday during budget estimates breakdown of that within communications, and I tabled it earlier today, so I think that would be available now for you to have.
The Honourable the Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Okay. And will the same amount be spent with Communications Nova Scotia again this year?
The Honourable the Minister of Community Services.
The only difference this year will be an increase of $5,000, and that's due to increase in wages and salaries as individuals go up the salary ladder within their own area of expertise.
The Honourable the Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
In terms of line-by-line estimates from page 5.2, Programs and Services, Senior Management, year-over-year estimates show the budget for senior management within the department going up by 2%. I'm assuming that the increase is the result of people moving up the line. Is that it?
I just remind the members again that the chatter is getting a little loud and it's hard for the minister and the members to hear the answers and the questions. The Honourable the Minister of Community Services.
That, what we see from that is, as you said, it is actually, once again, the increase in salary and also our vacancy management initiative.
The Honourable the Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
I'm not familiar with the vacancy management initiative. If the minister could just explain that.
The Honourable, the Minister of Community Services.
The Vacancy Management Initiative is a government-wide initiative in all our departments, and it's a commitment to not fulfill a position through attrition. That's a way that we can create reductions within our budgets.
The Honourable, the Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
So to take the government speak out of that, when somebody leaves, retires, or whatever, you look at, do we really need the position, rather than just saying we're going to fill somebody in there?
The Honourable, the Minister of Community Services.
Yes, there's two aspects to that. One is whether we do need to fill that position, so we would analyze that and see if there was a need for that, and whether there could be a cost savings there without affecting the services that we provide to the public. So that would be part of our decision making around that. And the other that, as you can understand, when you have a position available, sometimes it can take 3 months to 6 months to fill that position. So therefore there's monies there that you're saving because that position is not filled immediately.
The Honourable, the Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
In terms of corporate services unit, the year-over-year estimates show the budget for corporate services unit within the department were reduced by 17%, and I'm just wondering how you're going to reach this reduction and what's going to be cut in order to achieve this target, and if that's going to help your department reach its goals.
The Honourable, the Minister of Community Services.
We will be able to achieve our goals with that because those are positions that were vacant positions that we are not filling. Once again, it's that vacancy management initiative. And plus, I did table that information also, so that is readily available for you.
The Honourable, the Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
In terms of policy and information management, the year-over-year estimates show the budget for policy and information management within the department going up by 6.3%. And what would account for this increase, and how is that going to help the department reach overall departmental goals?
The Honourable, the Minister of Community Services.
You may know that the children aid societies used to be independent, and we would provide them with funding for their legal services through their grant program. But when they came over to the Department of Community Services, what we do now is we get those legal services through the Justice Department. So that's where those that figure comes from, is the services provided by the Justice Department.
The Honourable, the Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Okay, so if you used to have to pay them for that, but now it comes from within another department of the government, would that not just be a shifting rather than seeing an increase? And I don't follow how that works.
The Honourable, the Minister of Community Services.
2 points with respect to that. Number one is that it would have been within the Family Children's Services budget before, so you wouldn't have seen it there. Plus, what was being paid for in the past through the Children and Family Services was to private legal firms, so the cost factor was much higher than doing it through Justice. So it was actually a very beneficial move for us because the cost for services from Justice is lower than the cost if we were going to get that service through a private legal firm.
The Honourable, the Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Okay, so that's why I don't understand, the cost has gone up by 6.3%. Is that, it's, I think I've got it actually. So now you're including these legal services within this part here, whereas before it was money that was going out to Children's Aid. But if you look at the big picture, it's less money being paid to legal fees because you're using government lawyers, which, as poor government lawyers would know, make less than ones in private firms. Okay, good.
The Honourable the Minister of Community Services.
Absolutely, you're right on. So it actually saved money, and but we have the same level of services, which is a good point.
The Honourable the Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Year-over-year estimates show the budget for field offices within the department has increased by 6.4%. I'm assuming what counts for this increase would be the, was it 10 youth workers that were hired, or would that be something completely different?
The Honourable the Minister of Community Services.
It's not the outreach workers. What it is that we had financial clerks that were in other areas of the department within employment services. So what we've done is that they have gone out into the actual fields. So that's why it's reflected in those particular areas, because it's not within where they used to sit in the department.
The Honourable the Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
So I'm wondering, would that increase access to services for people by moving those people there? I'm just wondering what the reason was for the change.
The Honourable the Minister of Community Services.
I wasn't clear for you, and I apologize for that, is that we didn't actually physically move the people. We moved the way that it's set up in the book. So it's actually, the services they're where they were before, but it's reflective in the budget of the field services. So it's just a move of the dollar figures. It's a budget move rather than a person's move.
The Honourable the Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
So services for people with disabilities, year-over-year estimates show the budget for services for people with disabilities within the department went up by 2.2%. And I'm just wondering what services, new services will be made available as a result of this increase, or whether more people will be eligible for funding and support services?
The Honourable the Minister of Community Services.
What we have done, yes, in terms of services, that there is, as you can understand, there's a great need within SPD, and it's an area that has a lot of stresses on it, and those stresses have increased over the years and each and every year. So we have increased the funding actually for persons with disabilities. It's almost about $6 million, and that would be for such things as to act on the recommendations that were presented in the Braymore report, and also we'll be expanding our programming. One of the areas that we're trying to work very diligently and is with respect to waiting lists to access our services because of the great need that we're finding. And we also want to be more supportive of our service providers with their needs of increasing staff and their operating costs because of the increased needs under SPD. And we are also looking at our community-based programs, such as the Alternate Family Support, AFS, and the Independent Living Support programs. And those are some key areas that we feel that if we can provide more supports for independent living and also for families that are taking care of their loved ones that have complex needs, that means that they will not have a need to maybe put a person into a facility or a community home base because they're able to look after their loved ones at home with more resources from the department. And in turn, what this will also do is decrease our wait lists, which is vitally important for us.
The Honourable, the member for Bedford Birch Cove.
I'm wondering if the minister could give us an idea of what the wait lists look like. I don't know if there's a breakdown by area or whether it's just an overall number that you have, but if we could find out how many people are on the wait list for assistance from services for people with disabilities, that would be most helpful.
The Honourable, the Minister of Community Services.
Is there a particular area that you're looking at in terms of wait lists? Like, are you looking at wait lists that correspond with day programs or wait lists for community options? Or
The Honourable, the member for Bedford Birch Cove.
I kind of want them all.
The Honourable, the member of Community Services.
she wants them all? Well, I don't have them all here. I do know that we can provide them to you. I do know that we do have wait lists. We do recognize that, and that's why we're strategizing within SPD and putting more resources into SPD to see if we'll be able to tackle those wait lists.
The Honourable, the member for Bedford Birch Cove.
So, okay, thank you. In terms of family and children's services, our year-over-year estimates show the budget within the department was reduced by 2%, and I'm assuming that is the legal services that we're talking about there. Is that where we see that difference?
The Honourable, the Minister of Community Services.
There would be two factors there. The one that we talked about earlier about the legal costs and change in that. And the other factor, which is good news, is the fact that we have fewer children and youth that are within care of the Department of Community Services. So I think that that is showing that what we're doing in that area in encouraging more adoptions and the increase in adoptions and coming forward now with an adoption strategy for older children and for youth is vitally important. And so that's what that number is telling us, is that we are actually, we're doing a good job in that area, and I want to congratulate the staff that work within the Youth and Children's Services. Is a very difficult and challenging job, and yet very rewarding when they're able to make sure that a young person has a forever home.
The Honourable, the member for Bedford Birch Cove.
I'd like to just sort of turn the page for a bit and talk about old age security. As you know, anybody who hasn't been living under a rock knows the federal government is planning to change the age of old age security from 65 to 67 years, and this will obviously have an impact on community services, our clients, our model of service delivery, and also the province's bottom line. I'm just wondering what's the department's plan to address these changes? Have you been speaking to the federal government about the impact that this will have on Nova Scotia?
I just remind the members we have approximately 10 minutes left in this round of discussions. The Honourable, the Minister for Community Services.
Thank you. That's, I think, a very important and a wise question, because it's something that's on many people's minds. And the fact is, yes, it is very concerning to us. And we do realize that although we're looking at about 12 years from now that will be occurring, we do know that that is somewhat of what I would consider a download from the federal government to the provincial level, because there's no question that there will be a domino effect, and that we will see an increase in need, especially for our senior population. Because of that. As the Minister for Community Services and the Minister for Seniors, I have been vocal about that within the media. I know that the Premier has also made statements with respect to our concern. And I know it's, I actually was talking to a constituent the other evening that had a great concern about this, you know, and it is really hard because people have worked most of their life. Some people started earlier than others. I think this particular constituent had started working when she was 16, and boy, she's ready to have a break when she turns 65. And so, and very concerned too, because of the fact that the work in her employment over the years, she didn't have the luxury of having any pension plans or great pension plans. And we know that a lot of Nova Scotians and Canadians are in that position, and that it's very very frightful position to be in, and that what's going to happen in 12 years is going to be very serious. And it's my hope, though, that before that 12 years happens, that there will be a change in the federal government, who's in there, that we will have another party in there that understands and is concerned with our seniors, in the seniors that have worked so hard for our province and for all of Canada, what they have done, how hard they have worked, and this is what we provide them, that they have to wait now till they're 67, and the ramification of that is very detrimental. And I know that there was a strategy behind announcing that it was going to take about a 12-year period to get there, because of the fact that when it was originally when people were originally informed of this, there was such a backlash from our senior groups. And because our senior groups, bless their hearts, are so well organized, that they were able to create and implement such a media strategy and get the word out through the media, contact their MPs, and pound the tables that this cannot happen, because originally the fear was that it was going to happen much quicker than 10 or 12 years down the road, that the pressure was, the result of that pressure was to change it and to try to say it's going to be transitioned in over a 12-year period, because of the fact that at the federal level in government, they know that those individuals that are going to be affected by this are not in organized groups. We don't have middle-age clubs, and maybe what we need to do is create those. So what I encourage anybody that's speaking to me is, yes, it does work. Letter campaigns do work. Pressure does work. And I think that, you know, we may be looking at an election 4 years out, but I think that gives the middle-age club 4 years to pound the table, get the message out, and put a different government there that has the ability to empathize with people and know that the social aspect in our country is vitally important, and seniors play such a vital role in who they are that we need to make a change. And, you know, it is very discouraging to think that people put in, how many hundreds of hours do we add up at the end of the day, or I should say at the end of the year, that people put in over their lifetime in their workplace. you know, and they give so much of themselves. They go to work every day. They spend more time at the workplace than they even do at home with their own families, and that's the reward they get for being a senior in Canada, is that you now have to work another 2 years. And, you know, that is extraordinary. How about the person actually that does not have a job? What are they supposed to do, you know? And families, you may have a family member that a spouse is not working and the other one is working. You only have one income earner in the family. And so there's many questions. But I think that what people have to do is not forget it. They have to remember that this is an issue that's going to be coming forward, and that they have to be very diligent in their strategy to get people together in organized groups to let the federal government know that this is just not acceptable, and if they do not want to change their minds on that, that they won't be here in 10 or 12 years to see what happens. There'll be another political party in the seat. Thank you.
The honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Thank you, Minister, for your answer. I suspect we're both thinking of different parties being in government 12 years from now, but they probably have more common with each other than they do with the one that's currently there. My concern, I have to say, around old age security, obviously it is, you know, around seniors in general, but around women in particular, because what we know is that lots of women either have stayed home from the time they got married and had children, or took time out of the workforce to look after the children. As a result, they don't have the kind of either money in RRSPs built up, or they don't have the pension income built up that men have. And so women in particular are more vulnerable when it comes to a change of this kind. And you know, I don't know about the minister, but I took a few years home raising a family and just did some contract work during that time. So, you know, and I'm not, one of my best friends is in the first year, she's 54, so she'll be the first year of the people who will be hit. And she called me up one day and she said, did I make it or did I not? And, you know, she's divorced, she's a single mom, and I said, I think you're the first year that gets the full whammy. And so she wasn't happy, but boy, if your suggestion about letter writing and organizing is very good, because in fact, these, she's quite an organizer, so the federal government may in fact be sorry that they took on people like her. I also wanted to mention to the minister that if she is putting together any kind of a strategy to present to the federal government, to indicate to them what your concerns are around this particular issue, I would be most happy to join the minister in this. I have great concern about what this will do to Nova Scotia's economy, what it will do to just the budget for your department. If that department has to pick up the slack, or if it doesn't happen, what it will do to people who are living on limited incomes when they retire. And of course, you know, there's also the issue around workers who really can't work until 67. There are a lot of people who do physically demanding jobs, and they are just waiting until the day they turn 65 to be able to retire. And I think this particular change in our benefits is going to hit them very hard, because there are some jobs, you know, I remember my grandmother working, the company she worked for in Ontario was, the head office was transferred to Toronto, and so she would have a very long commute every day to go into Toronto. I remember she did it for about a year until she hit 63, and she said, I just can't do it anymore, and that wasn't even a physically demanding job. I'm hoping we'll get to speak some more. I have a lot more questions for the minister, as she can probably imagine, but I do want to thank her for answering the questions today in such a pithy manner, and I look forward to continuing on with budget estimates when our turn comes around again. Thank you.
I now recognize the honourable member for Argyle.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to stand and speak for a little bit on the Department of Community Services. First, I want to, of course, welcome George and Dave. I know they were great advisors to me when I had the opportunity to sit in that chair, and I definitely commend them for the hard work that they do on a daily basis in the Department of Community Services. The first thing is, I think following up from the member for Cape Breton, the Lakes, I think there was a couple of questions that he had asked about when it came to the childcare centers and more specifically the grants. And I think the minister talked a little bit about a framework during that time. And I'm just wondering maybe if the minister had an opportunity to quickly talk about that framework and maybe provide us a few more details when it came to the child care center grants. I think it's like enhancing playground equipment and things like that.
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
I know that the member opposite is aware because he sat in the minister's chair with respect to the daycare programs and the stimulus, the dollars, the federal dollars to help new daycares and help the expansion program for existing daycares. With respect to the budget aspect of where we're going with that particular, the playground program for equipment was available 2 years ago while we were doing the expansion program, and that has ended now. And so we do have a few daycares that are still committed to that might not have had the opportunity and things didn't work out the way they planned in order to build or expand. So we're still trying to work with those. There's not that many, but just try to get that all wrapped up. When he was talking about the framework, what I was speaking of was with respect to the early years itself. Okay, and the entire aspect of that, and what I was talking about was that the government, as noticed through the throne speech, has made a governmental commitment to go forward and to develop a framework in terms of how we're providing services now in the province of Nova Scotia for the early years, which does not just encompass daycares. It also encompasses your early years, early intervention, and there's many different aspects surrounding that. And we want to know from the public and parents and the nonprofit and the profit daycare providers, along with the early interventionists, all those areas where they see the future for early years and children. And that's what that's all about. That's the framework where we have announced it. We are finalizing the framework, and then the next step from that framework will be, what will the consultation process look like? When will that take place? That's very important, is the timing of that makes sure that when we do that, it is a time that people are available and have that opportunity. From that consultation process, then we'll be able to formulate a strategy based on what people of Nova Scotia want for the early years in this province, and how can we accomplish that, and what steps need to be developed to accomplish that. So that will very much involve the public, and I think that's very important, because I think that, of course, the public are the ones who receive the services, the ones that have the children, and they need to be part of designing what the future looks like for children in the province of Nova Scotia. Thanks.
The Honourable Member for Argyle.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I think that leads me to a pretty simple question on this. How long does the minister think that's going to take? Is this a 6-month process? Is it a year process? How long before she figures that the strategy should be available so that Nova Scotians can see it?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
We don't have a timeline. We don't want it to be a long process, though, I can tell you that. Once we do have that framework finalized and we do have a timeline, we will certainly let you know, because that's important to us. We want people to know how long of a process that we're looking at. As I mentioned earlier, sometimes the consultation process can be too long. We need to balance that, because then you're just consulting and you're not really getting anywhere. I know what the challenge is that so many people want the opportunity to voice their opinion. So we really have to make sure that people feel that they've had the opportunity to voice their opinion, yet that the consultation process doesn't slow down what we want to accomplish. So as soon as we have the framework finalized, which I'm hoping that will be in the next couple of months, we'll be able to provide you with more details with respect to the actual timelines and when things will be taking place publicly.
The Honourable Member for Argyle.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I appreciate that comment, because you know, we have been critical over time with this government, of course, with the amount of strategies and consultations that are going on, and some of them seem to take an awful long time, and we just sort of look at it as possibly being a holding it off for another day, or another decision, or another minister, or another government. But ultimately, I appreciate the minister's comments that this one is one that she wants to see go to fruition and be able to provide you know, a direction to Nova Scotia when it comes to early childhood development processes, child care, and all the things that of course fit within that. I would be remiss if I didn't maybe start a conversation on some more local issues in Southwest Nova Scotia, more particularly, and of course it would be around shift and the homelessness problem in southwestern Nova Scotia. And we've known over a number of weeks now, there's been conflicting stories on this one. Of course, we as MLAs, myself and the member for Yarmouth, have been approached by individuals from the Shift Board, been approached by students, we've been approached by a whole bunch of people explaining their position on shift. What they felt was their program, their model, the way they felt that this was the best model for our area. And then of course we hear of the agreement, the possibility of that agreement being signed under duress, moving into, of course, the funding that they would have been receiving from the department, helping a 24-hour service for homeless youth change, and going to of course another model. And then of course last week, and like I said, I'm just throwing a whole bunch of things out because I know it's going to be a long discussion. And then of course last week with the I think it was the homeless, the navigator positions that went out across the province, and they found that Shift thought that they were the ones that were going to be receiving that position, and then they didn't receive it. So I know there's a lot in there for the minister to talk about, but I thought it would give the minister an opportunity to maybe clear the air on this one, maybe explain a little better, because I admit that I hear from one side of the story, and a lot of times that's what happens to a lot of us here in this house, where we do hear one side of a story and we don't necessarily get the other one. And maybe give the minister an opportunity to explain Shift from the department side of things, what their understandings were with the individuals. I'm looking forward to that conversation.
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
I want to thank the member opposite for the opportunity, because I know that he sat, as I said earlier, in this position, and he knows how difficult it is, because everybody has different opinions and strong opinions, and it can be very emotional and very challenging when you're trying to do what you believe is right, and other people have a different opinion of what they believe is right. And sometimes, of course, if it doesn't match up, it creates a difficulty in providing the services, and you need partnerships that you trust each other and you can work together. So I am going to relate the story behind this and my involvement and the department involvement so we can clarify. I know that the member opposite is familiar with the fact that Shift started before we came into government, and that he was presented with the same challenge in terms that they were looking for provincial funding to open up a 24/7 homeless shelter in the Yarmouth area, as the community saw a need for that type of service. And that at the time the member opposite, in correspondence to them, had said he wasn't quite sure if that was the appropriate model, because there's different theories on whether a 24/7 model is really the model that we should be going forward with in the future. Part of the theory behind that is that some feel that it can be actually more of an enabler for the youth to not be able to work on what the real issues are. And we do know that there are situations where youth cannot go back with their family because there may be abuse or whatever. Then there's situations where they can, and you want to try to take a restorative approach. So when Shift came to the department before I was a minister, they were told very clearly that the province at that time, through the Department of Community Service, were not able to fund them because it was not a model that they were supporting at that time. Then when we came in, we got the same request. Now, keeping in mind that the Shift Board of Directors were able to get funding from the federal government for the facility that they bought. It's a beautiful Victorian house in Yarmouth, and I know how passionate people are when they come together and they have a cause and that they can see the need in the community and how they want to rally together. And I commend them for that and all the work that they put in it. And it's very difficult when you're given a chunk of money to be able to buy a place to say, no, we're not going to do that. So it's easier to give those kind of dollars, and that is typically the way the funding goes on the federal level, where they can give the capital dollars. The real challenge is the operational dollars. Once the place is built or the place is purchased, then somebody has to run it. It costs to run those type of places, any place. And that's where our red flags were popping up in terms of two things. One, not only we were not convinced whether that was the model that we wanted to see in Yarmouth and across the province. Now, keeping in mind that there are 24/7 models in the province that exist today that receive a great deal of funding from the Department of Community Services, but you also have to keep in mind that those have been in existence for many years, and that they are well established, and they also have a great means because of their being so established. They have many opportunities for fundraising. So the struggle for fundraising is not as great, although they work very hard at it, as establishing a new model or a new place. And so that's what we said to Shift, is that it is very expensive. It's not a sustainable model. And one of the things that we have to do in our role as ministers and departments, and I know the member opposite can appreciate this, is we have to look at the benefits of the entire province. I know people are very passionate for the area that they live in and the services that they want in their community, but we have to be responsible, and we have to look at what type of service are we providing that service throughout the province. So whether you live in Yarmouth or you live in Cape Breton as a youth, shouldn't you have the same opportunities? And to be able to fund one organization and not another is just creating injustice across the province. with this particular situation, we had a solution. So it was not just leaving shift high and dry. We had a solution. And so what we did is, although we told them point blank, we cannot fund your model, they came to us basically every 2 or 3 months with an operational deficit. And you were looking at about $30,000 every 2 or 3 months they were coming to us. Now, we did not want to put the youth out on the street, certainly, because they were already established. And we said what we would do is that we would keep funding your operational cost. However, we are designing a new model for youth services in the province of Nova Scotia, for the entire province, and that we would hope that you would be a part of that model. Now, as the minister, I visited Shift. I met with some of the youth and had wonderful conversations with them, and I could see the good work that Shift was doing. Don't get me wrong. They were doing an outstanding job in the community, and the youth were appreciative of that. And I also, what I did, and it was in the late summer, early fall, I met with the board of directors. And at that time, I said the department is ready to go forward with a new model. And what our new model looks like would be a model that we would be able to provide outreach workers throughout the entire provinces. There's 10 of them. And as a model, we're hoping we'll be able to expand that, but we want to see how this works. So we would have 10 outreach workers throughout the province, and we would be focusing on what you would call a hub model. And it's very similar to what we've been modeling with the homelessness initiative here in the city, where it's a model of support, not just a model of housing, but actual supports that a youth may need. So it once again would be an individualized service that the outreach worker would be able to work with the youth, identify what their needs are. Do they need help with a restorative approach to going back with their family? If that was not something that was workable for them, do they need employment supports? Do they need mental health supports? And we know in many of our communities throughout the province, we have service providers that are offering that service. And what we need to do is bring those services together. And that's what was not happening, is that the youth themselves had to navigate the system. And when they're in crisis, it's very difficult. And many adults cannot navigate the system. How do we expect youth to do it? So the outreach worker would be really like a mentor that be working with that youth on a life plan, seeing what resources are in that particular community in the province, and work to bringing those services together. Now, within our new model, we also were looking at the housing component. And so we were not leaving out the issue that youth need housing. We've created several things. One is that there's housing opportunities that already existed in community services that we were not utilizing for youth the way we should have. The other aspect is that we are looking at, and we are creating a family support system. It's not a foster family, but it's similar to that concept. And actually, it will be the first type of its kind in all of Canada, which we're really excited about. We've had people in the Yarmouth area that's already stepped up to the plate, and that would be people that know that they would take a youth in for a shorter period of time so they have a place to live, they have that family structure around them, because we thought that that was very important. So this was the discussion with Shift. They were very adamant about keeping it to 24/7. We said we did offer suggestions that if they wanted to sustain it as a 24/7, that perhaps we've seen some models like that where they've brought in volunteers. We know that can be challenging, but we thought there was a wonderful opportunity in Yarmouth because of two things: the School of Nursing, and also there's a program at the community college for human resources and think it's, and health, but there's a program, those two programs would have been a perfect opportunity to have students come in, and part of their practicum it would be to work at shift in the overnight. And we said that what we could also do, we had thought we could bridge those relationships with the community colleges, but they didn't want that. They wanted to operate the way that they had planned. So anyway, when I had my meeting with them, they were actually, I knew they were a little resistant on changing the 24/7, but they said, we agree, we will be part of your new model. And I said, well, it will be quite exciting because you already have the host. You could be our hub model. We went forward. We actually had 2 community meetings in Yarmouth, and that was to bring together all the service providers, plus shift, plus the youth. And those meetings actually went very well. People were excited about having this new model. And for whatever reason, SHIF made a decision that they no longer, that they didn't want to be part of this. And however, I think it's important to also note that what we did is we actually drafted a contractual agreement with them that they signed. And I know there's been people saying they signed under duress, but I can't imagine people in the department forcing them. They told me personally as minister that they were willing to go forward with this. I would have thought if they felt that it was heavy-handed with staff that they would have came to me right away and said, look, your staff has pushed us to sign this. I never heard a word from them. The only time that I actually heard anything was through the media. So it was total shock to me, if you want to know the honest truth, when I found out that there was a press release that they had issued to say that they had rejected the model. They wanted to stay with the 24/7 model. And so I found, very unfortunately, then everything started to happen in the media rather than coming to me as minister and having this discussion. And I was quite surprised that they made that decision not to support the model after they told me personally that they would support that model. And like I said, I mean, I know people are very passionate and I think that they've seen some success there, so they felt that we must have this model. But as I said, we're looking at a holistic model that could be provided for every youth throughout the entire province of Nova Scotia. So I was actually quite sad that they made that choice. And so they came back into the city and they had a meeting with my staff, and the staff told them, no, we still want to go forward with the original concept of a model, and that we would like you, and I have said publicly in media interviews that I really wanted SHIF to be part of this model because I think that they had a lot to offer, an awful lot to offer. But they still were adamant that they wanted to do the 24/7. When they came into the city and spoke with staff, I actually sat down and spoke with 2 of the youth, and one of the youth was one of the youth I had spoken to before. And you know, I was so impressed with the intelligence and the logic of those 2 youth, because they understood where we were trying to go with this. But they also understood the passion of SHIFT. And they felt caught in the middle. You know, here's the youth, and the adults are fighting, and the youth are there, and they're being the reasonable one, you know. So I give them a whole lot of credit in this whole situation. Then the next part was that we saw a press release saying that they hired an outreach worker. And I was shocked again. And I asked staff to call them and ask, why would you hire an outreach worker when you broke the agreement? And I guess their argument is that they feel that they kept with the agreement. And I'm saying, how can you keep with an agreement when you publicly said you're not going to support the new model? And in that agreement clearly specified that you transition out of a 24/7 service. So by their actions, I would say you can interpret that they broke the agreement. And part of not sticking with that agreement meant they weren't going to get an outreach worker. So we were very surprised that they would even go ahead and do that. And we contacted them immediately and said, we haven't, you know, that agreement doesn't exist. You broke the agreement. And the fact is that we haven't made a decision with you to have that outreach worker. And we were very clear, we were as clear as telling them over and over, and we weren't going to support them from the beginning with that model. There was no misconception or misinformation provided here. It's been very, very clear and very documented. So we felt that, you know, if you're going to have partnership and relationship, there has to be trust to that to go forward, and that was just not going to be workable. So we went to another organization in the community that's very, very well respected, Split Rock. And they, you know, it was difficult for them because you don't want in a small community set up bad relationship. But we even have people on Split Rock that left. I think there's an individual, the shift board, because they agreed with, that was previously, they agreed with the model that the member opposite had supported as minister and the new model that we were bringing forward. And so they have agreed, and so we have everything in place with Split Rock. We have the outreach worker will be through Split Rock. They will be offering the holistic services that we have spoken about. And we also have within the agreement with Split Rock that there's going to be transitional housing. So the housing component is taken care of. If there's an emergency, we have emergency housing for youth in the Yarmouth area. And we'll be bringing together everything from educational opportunities to drug treatment services, mental health services. And, you know, I think it's really unfortunate that sometimes people think that it's these things.
Order, please.
Okay.
We've reached the moment of interruption. The Committee of the Whole on Supply will now rise and report its business to the House.